All right, welcome back. J.P. Morgan cutting its dividend 86% after hours. The street likes it. Karen Feinerman hit it when the news broke. Protecting capital if you're a bank right now, not seen as necessarily a bad thing. Market agrees with you.
Right, but Pete and I were just talking about for GE, maybe it's already priced in there. I know Immelt sort of put himself in a corner saying, I won't cut the dividend. Just
cut away.
Cut away. Why not?
Yeah. All right.
If J.P. Morgan's doing it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
From 38 cents to 5 cents.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Stress testing.
Yeah.
We talked about it.
Lots of folks are talking about it, including, of course, all of our politicians. Among them, Representative Paul Ryan out of Wisconsin, a Republican, wrote an editorial in the New York Times recently. I want to read a piece of it to you, which goes to all the borrowing that's going on, and then we'll talk to Mr. Ryan about where he thinks we ought to go here. But first, here's the quote. It seems that no one in Washington is discussing what happens when the world begins this gargantuan borrowing spree. It is possible that the Federal Reserve will succumb to pressure to monetize our debt, that is, print new money to buy our bonds. To American families, inflation is a destroyer of savings, a killer of wealth, a crusher of confidence. It calls into question the value of our money. We welcome you, Representative Ryan, to the program. As you know, and we've invited the financial crisis to join us at the table indefinitely here, as opposed to trying to pretend it doesn't exist at this point. How would you deal with this crisis? In other words, on a systemic level. You make valid points about inflation. We talk about it all the time. But you're looking at problem number 2, which is a potentially huge problem, before we solve problem number 1. How would you adjust the addressing of the bank problem to better try to hedge yourself for the inflation problem that you're so concerned about?
I don't want problem number 1 and the solution to problem number 1 to create problem number 2. That's the point. I feel
nobody does.
Right.
So I'm curious how you would counsel us on the bank / slowing economy problem, so as to avoid problem number 2 in your view.
There's banks and there's fiscal policy. For fiscal policy, I think we're doing the wrong fiscal policy. We're borrowing and spending our way, thinking that that's going to turn this economy around, and it's going to make us go borrow 4 times than we ever have in a single year, according to the Bureau of Public Debt. And the banks, I believe in getting the toxic assets off to the sidelines. I'm more of a fan of the sort of RTC structure, bad bank model. Combine the TARP with the TALF, the Fed's balance sheet, and use that to sequester the toxic assets. So that's personally what I would do. But the fiscal policy, which is what the legislative branch of government is doing, that was going in the wrong direction. So now we're going to go borrow all this money. At the same time, all these other governments are doing the same thing, like the governments that buy our bonds. And we're going to go out there, and I think the yield curve is going to give us some rude awakenings. And my concern is that we've put our fiscal policy on a collision course with our monetary policy. Today, the problem is deflation. No 2 ways about it. But I fear tomorrow the problem will be inflation. We've expanded the monetary base. M2 is going up a lot.
Yeah.
That's necessary. I concede that. But with the kind of fiscal policy, which I don't think will work, which will lead to higher taxes, I think you're going to see on Thursday an Obama budget that says higher taxes on capital, higher taxes on savings, higher taxes on work, on small businesses.
And do you say that because, hold on a second, Paul, do you say that because you're speculating that, or do you say that because you feel like you have information that leads you to know that?
I just came from the fiscal summit at the White House. I just got from there 10 minutes ago, and the inferences I'm getting is that's what the case is going to be. I believe, I'm not saying I know this for sure, but what I've been led to believe is that we're going to see in 2011 higher tax rates on capital, savings, investment, and work. That's going to hurt our economy. That's going to give us higher unemployment. And with all this fiscal stimulus of this borrow and spend, which I really don't think works, it's going to give us this problem of borrowing, and I believe the temptation will give us this inflationary problem.
How much of a minority do you feel like with the point of view that you hold right now with the people that you work with?
Very much the minority. I mean, look, we don't have any of the votes. The only power we have is the power of persuasion, the power to give our views, and that's exactly what we're doing. We just hope we're wrong. I really hope that what I'm saying is not going to happen, that this Keynesian stimulus works, even though it didn't work in the 30s here in Japan in the 90s, and that we won't have this temptation to monetize. But yet the Fed already saying that they might buy long-term bonds. I mean, they're already sort of talking in this direction. I think if Ben Bernanke stays on as Fed chair, I feel better about it. I feel that he started these facilities. He, of all people, knows how best to wind these things down, mop up this excess liquidity at the right time. I worry that if they change Fed chairmen midstream in the crisis, that the prediction I'm making will come true.
All right. We'll have you back. I got to jump to to Washington, D.C. You would think that this was a...
He's in Washington.
You wouldn't think this is a stock market show. Yeah, we're doing another part of Washington, D.C. Sorry, I said I'm going to Washington. Guy's in Washington. John Harwood has the news on the cabinet in the Obama administration. What's going on, John, in another part of Washington, D.C.?
Exactly. In the NBC News part of Washington, D.C., Dylan, look, I've talked to a couple of senior White House officials who say that the likely choice to replace Judd Gregg as the nominee to be Commerce Secretary is former Washington State Governor Gary Locke. He's a Chinese American. He practices international law. Obviously, the China economic relationship is very important to the United States, important to the Commerce Department. But this has been a troubled cabinet appointment. Bill Richardson was the initial choice. He foundered on an investigation that was going on. Judd Gregg couldn't stomach the stimulus package. He thought it was ideologically out of sync with him. It now appears that later this week, President Obama is going to nominate Gary Locke, the former governor of Washington State, who served 2 terms in the late 90s and early part of this decade.
What is your sense, really quick, John, even beyond this, of Obama's handle on his cabinet at this point? In other words, what's the stability in that room, and is it getting better or worse?
I think he's doing okay now that he filled this particular hole. The real problem, I think, Dylan, is getting some of those second-level appointees confirmed, even at the Treasury Department, where Tim Geithner, of course, has been confirmed. A lot of the people who ought to be working for Geithner have not yet been confirmed in their jobs, and it's often the people at the second and third levels who are necessary to really implement the policies that people are fashioned.
And then how much of a variable is that in the delays and all the rest of it, and getting any details, whether it's from Geithner or anybody else?
I think it's relevant. I think one of the reasons why, there are multiple reasons, including the fact that these are very, very difficult policy issues to resolve. But one of the challenges is when you don't have a lot of the people who are playing behind Tim Geithner, makes it more difficult to quickly come out with all of the details fleshed out on the policies he's articulated.
All right, John, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much. From one part of Washington to another. Yeah, we're going to bring it back to New York right after this. Carter Worth, Dennis Gartman, Bill Siebman, lots still to come. Carter up on the technicals right after this, then we'll talk to Bill about the banks, and then Dennis about whatever's left after that. We're back right after this.